Alfonzo's Arctic Adventure is the sequel to 2017's Eskimo Bob, and like its predecessor, it's a puzzle platform game based on the same Flash cartoon. The game is split up into 90 relatively small levels across 6 worlds, some of them hidden, and the goal in each level is to explore and collect all of the fish, while avoiding the enemies, digging through the snow, and figuring out various platform challenges. Eskimo Bob was Thomas Guinan's first full NES game, and while it was a polished, complete game, you could tell it was graphically and mechanically fairly simple. Alfonzo improves upon almost every single aspect of Eskimo Bob. First of all, there are way more distinct environments. You have regular snow levels, forest levels, underwater levels, cave levels, and castles. One complaint I had about the original game is that almost every level was some variation of a snow level, so there's much more variety here. Instead of just switching between Alfonzo and Bob this time, each environment has its own special character that you switch to when you find an igloo. So you play as Alfonzo this time because Bob supposedly got kidnapped, and he still has his stick poke attack. There's Magnus, who totally isn't Bob, and he could do a jumping downward punch. Fenwood is immune to certain kinds of enemies and can just run into them to kill them, but he can't jump as high. He also falls through snow if he's standing on it. And the girl throws daggers, and I'm pretty sure she jumps higher than Alfonzo. She's mobile and deadly at a distance. She is by far my favorite. Another big addition to the game is boss fights. There are 7 unique boss fights in the game, which is a huge improvement over the first game, which repeated a variation of the same immobile boss 3 or 4 times. All of the bosses in this game have different mechanics, a specific player character they fight, and they all have some kind of dynamic element to them. Some are pretty standard. There's a boss who just jumps around on platforms, and there's a horizontal shooting stage. But I was particularly impressed by the episode 4 boss, an Easter bunny who jumps around on eggs. You stack up the eggs that are coming up by punching them down with Magnus. If you hit a like color, the eggs break and create openings in the floor, which you're trying to get the bunny to fall through. If you don't match up the eggs, you just build the floor higher, and the bunny becomes more dangerous since it can now jump higher and hit you more easily. This is just a totally off-the-wall puzzle mechanic. It's unique, it's fun, it's challenging, it's thematic, and I think it's the most memorable thing in the game. Yet another big addition to the game is a Super Mario Bros. 3 style world map and secrets. While it's not as complex as Super Mario 3 with item houses and stuff running around, it does allow a non-linear path through the game, especially with the addition of secret exits. There are 2 kinds of secrets in this game. Each level has a secret golden fish hidden in a snow block, usually the most out-of-the-way snow block in the level, and sometimes levels have secret doors which can lead to a secret fish-filled area. These secret exits create new paths on the world map, and they can reveal paths that skip a level or reveal new levels entirely. Besides all this, there are tons of other minor improvements over the first game throughout. There's a whole lot more animation, both objects like fish and spikes to just clouds or torches in the background. It's got story cutscenes that play throughout the game. There's this 2-player battle mode, which I didn't even really dig into. It's got more music than the first game. There's a bunch of new enemies, some which interact with the new environmental elements. For example, there's this cup that drops down snow, which builds up so you can jump on it. If you remember the worst part of Alucard's path in Castlevania 3, you'll be quite familiar with this mechanic. But if this snow falls into water, it turns into ice on the surface, and that's kinda cool. There are also these switches that toggle disappearing blocks a la Mega Man, and a few more minor mechanics in later levels that I won't spoil. Overall, it's just a much more mechanically dense game, considering it keeps the same basic premise of just collecting all the fish. So I think that was 5 straight paragraphs of just improvements, better environments, new mechanics, more characters, way more bosses, secrets, better graphics. Alfonzo is clearly a major evolution over the first game, a game I already think is quite fun. The one thing I don't think Alfonzo improved is the level design. It's not bad, it's just kinda the same, and I don't think the new levels nearly explore the new mechanics well enough. First off is the difficulty. To be clear on my tastes, I prefer challenging, even punishing platform games, and the Eskimo Bob games just aren't that, so it's really not my wheelhouse. Eskimo Bob's difficulty curve looks like this. The majority of the game is pretty easy, but it ramps up and there's some interesting levels in the end. Alfonzo's difficulty curve also looks like this. Half the game is spent on relatively basic stages that gradually introduce and ramp up the new mechanics. This is just a personal pet peeve of mine, but I don't think every video game needs to start from square one. I like when a sequel picks up where the last one left off, or at least quickly shoves us through the tutorial stuff for new players and then ramps us up into new challenges. Not that I walked through every single level my first time, or that I didn't game over or anything, but the game didn't really start challenging me until the end of the 5th episode. Also, for the absolutely numerous new mechanics that were added to this game, I don't think most of them are used to their full potential. Every once in a while, you'll see something neat. In stage 412, there's this switch that toggles blocks that let you jump the gap, but it also toggles a block at the top of this ladder so you can't get up. You have to toggle the blocks, then use the cup guy to create permanent blocks on the temporary ones, and then go back to the switch and toggle it back off. It's a simple idea, but it's a neat trick. Most levels are more straightforward than this, under a minute long, and most are more about avoiding enemies than figuring out some mechanical trick like this. Now, maybe I'm just spoiled these days as a platform game fan, because we live in this world of Super Mario Maker. I can play courses that push Mario mechanics to absurd limits made by the most creative people in the world. I think it's safe to say if Mario people were let loose on Alfonzo, they could combine these switches, falling snow blocks, ice, and different enemy types into just these much more insane and interesting contraptions. But even beyond that crazy potential, I just think levels could have been a little more interesting, a little more challenging. Sometimes you play a level in Adventures of Lolo or Solomon's Key, games that are both mechanically lighter than Alfonzo, and you get through some tough trial or combine mechanics in a clever way and you just go, that was absolutely ingenious. And that just didn't happen as much in Alfonzo. And again, it feels like I'm being overly negative about such a core part of the game. The level design isn't bad, it's just not overly clever. The secrets also don't mesh with how I play games personally. If you want to collect all 95 golden fishes, you'll have to find every secret in every level the first time you play through because you can't replay levels. That means if you accidentally miss a secret, you have to reset. Also, the fish disappear when you game over, so it's gotta be 100% complete, full run through the game, no game overs. If I could go back to the completed levels, like in a Super Mario World, I would totally go and find the fish and the secret exits I missed. I did find as many secrets as I could, but I just don't have the motivation to try to do one perfect run of that whole thing. Really, most of the secrets don't involve anything crazy or more platforming. A lot of it is just at the end of the level, there will be some snow blocks that are past the last fish. So you just have to go over there and hit a few blocks before you finish the level right away. Overall, Alfonso's Arctic Adventure is a very worthy follow-up to Eskimo Bob. It doesn't change the underlying formula, but it revamps the entire game with incremental upgrades to every single aspect, so it's way more than a fresh coat of paint on the same thing. The game took me about 3 hours to run through the first time, and it cost $9 for the ROM on itch.io, and physical copies start at $50 for the cart. If you're just interested in the gameplay and haven't played the first game, Eskimo Bob is only $3 on Steam, and I think it's just as fun as Alfonso is. And it's definitely worth playing to see just how far Spoony Bard Productions has come in a relatively short period of time, but you'd have no issues jumping straight into Alfonso's Arctic Adventure. While the level design alone might not have completely impressed me, just about every other aspect of this game puts it among the most polished, complex, complete NES homebrews you can get. And I certainly think it's a landmark release in a homebrew scene that's becoming increasingly crowded. That's all for Alfonso's Arctic Adventure. Thanks for watching.